They'll never tell you this, because if they did, they'd lose the only power they believe they have over you. What they call charm, charisma, or even intelligence is nothing more than disguised manipulation. But here's the raw truth. Manipulators tremble when they encounter someone who sees through the mask. This is where politics guided by reality, not ideals, becomes their greatest weapon. Since Machiavelli's time, it's been clear. The end justifies the means when the game is to survive human wiles. Better to be feared than loved isn't cruelty, it's self-protection. And when you understand how to use these 7 psychological tricks, you'll discover you can turn the tables without raising your voice, without wasting energy, without justifying yourself. Only with presence, silence, and decisions based on true human nature. The problem is that most people never learned this. They grew up hearing that kindness always wins, that giving in avoids conflict, that love is enough to be respected. But reality doesn't forgive naivety. While you try to please, someone else calculates how to invade your space. And the more you explain yourself, the easier it is to be manipulated. Here, you'll learn to set boundaries without guilt, to use silence as a sharp sword, to demonstrate that the cost of disrespect is greater than any possible gain. You'll understand how to create your own loyal armies within yourself, how to cultivate virtù so as not to depend on luck, and how to maintain the appearance of virtue without being held hostage by it. Brace yourself. This isn't a sugary self-help video, but a strategic manual, because those who understand these weapons no longer live as targets, but as players. And players who understand the rules of real human nature aren't manipulated, they rule. Many people confuse disrespect with small, everyday rudeness. But if you look deeper, you'll realize that disrespect is always a matter of power. It's not just the rudeness of someone who didn't say good morning, but the calculated gesture of someone measuring how far they can go without encountering resistance. It's as Machiavelli already suggested, politics is guided by reality, not ideals. In practice, disrespect reveals a clear reading of true human nature. If someone understands that you don't react, they realize they can advance further. This is where you see the difference between simply being unpleasant and using disrespect as a tool of dominance. Those who practice this, even unconsciously, are always assessing their limits. Imagine a work meeting where someone constantly interrupts another person. At first glance, it seems like a simple matter of etiquette. But if you observe through the eyes of a strategist, you'll see an attempt to assert authority. The disrespect, in this case, functions as a test. Will he accept being belittled? This attitude echoes the logic of better to be feared than loved, because those who don't assert themselves in these situations lose not only their right to speak, but also the symbolic space they should occupy. And once someone cedes that space, it's difficult to regain it. It's worth remembering that not all disrespect is loud. It often manifests itself in silent gestures, not responding to messages, not acknowledging merit, ignoring someone's presence. These are subtle but equally corrosive ways of demonstrating that the other person is unimportant. The appearance of virtue, so valued by Machiavelli, can be used here as a mask. The disrespectful person feigns innocence but knows perfectly well what they're doing. And those who don't notice end up thinking it's all in their head, when in fact it's a strategy to weaken themselves. True disrespect isn't an accident, it's a calculated move. Even if it seems impulsive, there's always an underlying intentionality, because it exposes those willing to use psychological force instead of courtesy. It's like an army. If there aren't loyal troops ready to react, the territory becomes vulnerable. In this field, having your own armies means firm stances, constant presence, and adaptability to changing situations. Those who mistake disrespect for coincidence end up ignoring the fact that, deep down, there's always a power play going on. When someone learns to recognize disrespect as a weapon rather than a slight, they begin to react differently. They don't try to justify themselves or seek approval. Instead, they respond with clear boundaries and a calculated use of force, whether in tone of voice, silence, or even distancing themselves. This is where virtù comes in, the ability to shape reality to one's advantage. Because if disrespect is a strategic move, the response must be as well. And it is precisely at this point that the need arises to differentiate simple rudeness from strategic disrespect, which leads us to the next reflection. People disrespect because, deep down, disrespect is always a test. No one invests energy in putting someone down if there's no expectation of return, whether in status, practical advantage, or a sense of power. It's like throwing a stone into a lake just to see how far the waves rise. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that human beings constantly measure how far can I go without suffering consequences. And when there's no reaction, the answer is clear. One can go further. The end justifies the means, and disrespect becomes precisely the means to impose hierarchy. Power dynamics are relentless. When one person senses weakness in another, they tend to exploit it. It's almost instinctive. Think of a dog that senses fear. If its owner isn't firm, it takes control of the situation. The same thing happens in the human realm. Those who display insecurity, excessive justification, or eagerness to please open the door to abuse. Machiavelli would say that without loyal armies of its own, any kingdom is vulnerable. On the social level, these armies are composed of clear boundaries, a firm stance, and the ability to command respect. Another crucial factor is excessive tolerance. When someone accepts small transgressions without question, they set a precedent for greater aggressions. It's like allowing a neighbor to park in your spot just today. Before long, it becomes a habit. Disrespect works like this. It starts small and grows until it becomes unsustainable. What seemed like mere politeness becomes disguised submission. The appearance of virtue in this case works against those who tolerate too much. After all, those who are seen as always understanding become easy targets for exploiters. Disrespect also comes as a way of testing another's emotional balance. Some people provoke just to see how they react. If the other person explodes in anger or shrinks into shy silence, the game is won for the provocateur. Here, constant adaptability is key. Not every provocation deserves a direct response, but none can be ignored as if it didn't exist. Virtue consists in discerning when to remain silent, when to smile ironically, and when to make it clear, firmly, that the line will not be crossed. Ultimately, people disrespect because they believe it's worth it. It's a cost-benefit calculation. If the consequences are zero, the abuse continues. If the cost is high, whether in loss of credibility, direct confrontation, or even strategic contempt, disrespect loses its usefulness. Therefore, it's better to be feared than loved in this regard. The healthy fear of facing a strong barrier is what prevents abusers from advancing. But to understand how this respect is solidly built, we need to delve into the Machiavellian logic that underpins human relationships. Respect is not born of affection, but of the perception of strength. It's hard to admit, but human beings respond more to the fear of loss than to the desire to please. Machiavelli saw this clearly. It's better to be feared than loved, as long as one avoids being hated. In practice, this means that no one gains respect by simply being good people. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, teaches that kindness, without firmness, becomes an invitation to abuse. When someone realizes that their presence imposes invisible limits, then true respect is born. See how this works in everyday life. A beloved but permissive teacher quickly loses the classroom. But one who enters, maintains posture, uses strategic silence, and doesn't need to raise their voice, achieves an almost natural order. This is the calculated use of force, not shouting, but imposing presence. Just as a ruler needs his own loyal armies to protect his domain, each person needs to build their own inner armies, confidence, clarity, and firmness. Without these, no matter how much they are loved, sooner or later they will be disrespected. Machiavelli spoke of virtù and fortuna as pillars of leadership. Virtù is the ability to act according to true human nature, without illusions. Fortune is the unpredictability of life, which rewards those who are prepared. In the realm of relationships, those who understand this logic know that respect doesn't come from expecting others to be good, but from preparing for when they aren't. It's about building a reputation, positioning oneself so that the very lack of immediate reaction is interpreted as strategy, not weakness. It's important to understand that respect isn't something you ask for, but something you inspire. When someone shouts for respect, they usually lose it. When someone stands firm in the face of provocation without needing to explain too much, their authority grows. This is the paradox. Silence can speak louder than 1,000 words, as long as it's not confused with submission. Here, constant adaptability is key. It's not about always reacting the same way, but about adjusting your strategy to the situation, demonstrating that every gesture is deliberate. In Machiavellian logic, respect arises from the perception that others have the power to punish or reward. But in everyday life, this doesn't mean being cruel, but rather being unshakable. Creating an invisible presence is like building a silent wall around yourself. People may not understand where it comes from, but they feel it. This kind of aura is the fruit of discipline, clarity, and firmness. And when respect is established this way, it becomes more difficult to erode. However, many make the mistake of going down this path and end up fueling disrespect without realizing it. And that's where the next point comes into play. One of the most fatal mistakes is trying to be accepted at any cost. People believe that by always being available and nice, they'll be more respected. But in reality, it's the opposite. When someone molds themselves excessively to fit into someone else's space, they lose their own shape. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that this need for approval is seen as weakness. Machiavelli would say that by giving up one's territory, one gives up one's internal army, and those who don't have their own loyal armies soon become easy prey. Another classic mistake is over-excusing yourself. Explaining every detail, trying to convince the other person that you had no ill intentions, or apologizing unnecessarily only reinforces the idea of guilt or insecurity. It's like giving ammunition to the enemy. The calculated use of force here would be to simply state the point and move on, without excess words. After all, those who are confident in their position don't need to constantly prove themselves right. And the more someone talks to defend themselves, the more they lose authority in the eyes of those watching. Reacting emotionally also fuels disrespect. When someone explodes in anger or cries in the face of an insult, it conveys precisely the message that they've been hit where they feel. Better to be feared than loved in this regard means maintaining composure even when attacked. This isn't inhuman coldness, but strategy. Virtue lies in mastering oneself before attempting to dominate the situation. A simple example, in an argument, the one who maintains a low and calm tone while the other yells always appears stronger and more worthy of respect. Confusing silence with submission is perhaps the most insidious mistake. Some remain silent out of fear and others out of calculation. Strategic silence is one of the most powerful weapons there is because it forces others to deal with their own echo. But if silence is merely an omission, it becomes an invitation to abuse. It is in this balance that constant adaptability comes into play. Sometimes silence is a virtue, sometimes speaking is necessary. Knowing the difference is what separates respected presence from disregarded passivity. These mistakes, when compounded, create an invisible reputation for fragility. It's like building a sandcastle. At the first wave of disrespect, everything crumbles. The appearance of virtue, without real strength behind it, becomes just a mask, and those who live by masks are sooner or later unmasked. Therefore, the great secret lies not in seeking acceptance, but in learning the right strategies to turn the tables. And this is precisely where Machiavelli's wisdom offers us practical tools to transform respect into reality. Turning the tide doesn't require shouting, but clear boundaries. True strength rarely needs to be displayed. It's like a lion. It doesn't need to roar constantly to be respected. Machiavelli argued that decisions should be based on real human nature, not romantic ideals. In practice, this means that imposing limits isn't cruel, but self-preservation. When someone stands firm without hesitation, they convey the message that they're not willing to compromise their worth. And those who understand this realize that the end justifies the means. Sometimes a firm stance is enough to nip disrespect in the bud. Silence can be more powerful than any words. Withdrawing from a discussion when everyone expects a reaction demonstrates a calculated use of force. It's not an escape, it's a strategy. Think of a boss who receives a public provocation and, instead of responding immediately, simply looks, takes note, and moves on. Days later, he resolves the situation, practically, without fanfare. This kind of attitude creates an aura of mystery and invisible authority. Better to be feared than loved applies here. No one wants to test the limits of someone who knows how to wait for the right moment to act. Another strategy is to demonstrate that the cost of disrespect always outweighs the benefit. This doesn't mean revenge, but consequences. For example, if someone on a team consistently disrespects others, they may not receive the best projects or access the same opportunities. Reality-driven politics shows that people respond to incentives and punishments. When they realize that disrespect leads to concrete losses, they quickly learn to control themselves. It's virtù in action, using available resources intelligently to maintain order. Machiavelli also spoke of loyal armies. In everyday life, these armies are solid alliances. Having people around you who know your worth is crucial. If an attack arises, this circle protects your reputation. This is why leaders build support networks, because no one rules alone. And just as a prince needs soldiers, each person needs allies who reaffirm their strength. Without this, any isolated attack can seem greater than it really is. Constant adaptability is the final piece of this mechanism. There is no fixed manual of responses, but principles that guide every move. Sometimes it's necessary to remain silent, sometimes to laugh contemptuously, sometimes to act with immediate firmness. The secret is to never be predictable, because predictability breeds vulnerability. Those who learn to vary their reactions create a kind of invisible wall. The adversary never knows where to attack, and it is precisely in this balance between toughness and flexibility that the essential question arises: when to punish and when to ignore. Knowing when to punish and when to ignore is the fine art of power. Machiavelli always made it clear: decisions should be based on real human nature, not ideals. If someone disrespects you but poses no real threat to your authority, ignoring it may be more effective than punishment. After all, strategic contempt cuts deeper than retaliation. On the other hand, when the attack threatens to erode your presence or image in the eyes of others, silence becomes weakness. This is where the calculated use of force comes into play, demonstrating that the end justifies the means. Exposing disrespect at the right time is a surgical strike. Imagine someone who repeatedly provokes you in public. If you explode with anger, you lose your temper. But if, at the right moment, you highlight this person's contradiction in front of everyone, the humiliation is returned with a vengeance. This is the logic of better to be feared than loved. The person doesn't have to like you, but they will think twice before trying again. Loyal armies in this case mean internal preparation to act firmly without losing their grip on emotion. Contempt is also a powerful weapon. Ignoring certain attacks sends the message that you are on another level, unreachable. It's like a king who doesn't respond to village gossip. Politics, guided by reality, shows that some battles aren't worth the effort because they only diminish those who descend into them. Here, virtù reveals itself, the ability to discern what truly matters, to not allow oneself to be drawn into arenas where there is nothing to gain. After all, responding to everything is a sign of insecurity. Choosing is a sign of power. The key to balance lies in making each response a lesson. When punishment comes, it must be memorable. When silence reigns, it must be deafening. This is how each attack becomes a reinforcement of one's own authority. A practical example. In the workplace, smart leaders don't punish for every mistake, but choose crucial moments to act so that the lesson is learned for everyone. Constant adaptability is key. Sometimes an iron fist is necessary. Other times, contempt is more devastating. This game of alternation builds a solid reputation. Those who never respond appear weak. Those who always respond appear desperate. Respect is born precisely from this balance between toughness and strategic indifference. Machiavelli knew that governing is about managing perceptions, and the same is true for our relationships. Punishment and ignorance, when well balanced, create the image of someone who never loses control of their own narrative. And it is from there that the path is paved for sustainable respect, one that depends not on love or sympathy, but on unwavering presence. Sustainable respect is not built in the heat of a single victory, but over a coherent trajectory. It's like building solid walls that stand the test of time. Every gesture, every decision, every strategic silence reinforces the structure. Machiavelli taught that it is better to be feared than loved, as long as one avoids being hated, and this defines the foundation of lasting respect. It's not about winning momentary applause, but creating an aura of presence that isn't shaken by small storms. It's politics guided by reality, not ideals. Those who depend on the love of others are always hostage to their moods. The key is to build a reputation. Those who carry the appearance of virtue combined with firm actions create an invisible shield against disrespect. It's like the person who, upon entering a room, doesn't need to say anything. Everyone knows they have authority there. This isn't achieved in a day, but through the constant repetition of consistent actions. The calculated use of force, without exaggeration, adds points to one's public image. And as Machiavelli said, decisions based on real human nature will always carry more weight than speeches embellished with good intentions. Sustainable respect also arises from the balance between virtù and fortuna. Virtù shapes character. It is discipline, clarity, and constant adaptability. Fortune is the unexpected, that which no one can control. When chance plays against them, those with virtù remain standing, and this further reinforces the image of strength. It's like a leader who, even in a crisis, remains calm and firm. Everyone around thinks, if he doesn't crumble, neither will we. It is at this moment that one's own loyal armies reveal themselves. They are not just external allies, but one's own trained mind. Another pillar is avoiding being hated. Here, Machiavelli was spot on. If hatred corrodes, respectful fear strengthens. Those who seek only to be loved will sooner or later be betrayed by shifting interests. But those who build an unshakable reputation, taking care not to humiliate unnecessarily or abuse power, create a kind of respect that survives even intrigue. It's like a tree with deep roots. It may sway in the wind, but it doesn't fall. The secret is simple: firmness without cruelty, discipline without blind rigidity. This psychological legacy is what makes Machiavelli's teachings timeless. Respect is never a coincidence. It is the result of conscious choices, of a strategy that combines the appearance of virtue, the calculated use of force, and an awareness of true human nature. Those who understand this stop chasing acceptance and start building presence. And when presence is unshakable, disrespect simply doesn't stick. It may even appear, but it dissolves because it finds nowhere to take hold. And it is precisely this point that ties together all the psychological tricks that make manipulators tremble. Now that you know these 7 tricks, the question is simple. Will you continue living on autopilot, letting others dictate your worth? Or will you take control of your own narrative? Manipulators only thrive in the fertile ground of naivety. When you set boundaries, use strategic silence, and show that the cost of disrespect outweighs any gain, they back off, always. What would happen if, starting today, you stopped seeking to be loved at any cost and began to be recognized as unshakable? How would your relationships change if, instead of justifying every step, you simply demonstrated your presence? Machiavelli had already made it clear. Respect isn't luck, it's strategy. Perhaps you realize that part of your life has been fueled by these common mistakes: giving in too much, explaining yourself too much, trusting too much in the kindness of others. But what if now you chose to build a reputation for strength, apparent virtue combined with real virtue? Who could manipulate you if you became the wall they couldn't climb? It's not about revenge, but survival. It's not about cruelty, but about clarity. Because in the end, politics is guided by reality, not ideals. And only those who understand this can walk free without invisible chains. So tell me, will you apply this today, or will you wait for the next blow to remind you? Write in the comments what opened your eyes the most. And if you want to continue delving deeper into this path of psychological power and inner freedom, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, each video is a new weapon in your strategic library.